But we are so honored and so grateful to Ken and Yvonne for offering to share with us a bit of their story. Obviously, after 42 years of being married, that's that's more than an hour can encompass. But we are grateful that for whatever we're able to learn from you and to hear from you as we have this conversation together. So as I mentioned, Ken and Yvonne married for 42 wonderful years, 3 daughters, 4 grandchildren. They joined Shalom in 1979, according to Shul Cloud. Is that correct? Does that correspond to your memory? But you got to unmute, or else this is going to be a very one-sided conversation.
That is correct.
That is correct. 1979. You've seen a lot of history. I can't wait for the book to come out. And in all of those years, Ken and Yvonne have been involved in just about every facet of Shalom life, from governance to services to adult ed to sisterhood to social action. I'm probably missing about 17 other things, but truly have been a part of the essence of this community for so very long. And I know that many of the people who are logged in tonight know you well and love you both very much and feel very connected to you, but may not know some of the story that you are with honesty and generosity going to share with us tonight. So let's just dive in, Ken and Yvonne. Could tell us a little bit about your families of origin. Where did you both grow up? Who are the members of your immediate family? Tell us a little bit about where you come from.
I grew up in Queens in New York City. One sister.
Went to Stuyvesant High School, went to SUNY at Buffalo, came down to Washington to law school at GW. And that was 1973. And I've been here ever since.
Were your parents American born or?
Oh, my father was born in Lithuania, emigrated to Israel to escape the Tsar's army, was actually in the police force in Palestine.
Really?
Yes. Then came to the United States. One of my aunts was already here. He served in the army in World War II as an interpreter. He knew, 5-6 languages because all the Eastern European languages. My mother was born here. Her parents came from Russia.
Yvonne?
I was born in suburb of Philadelphia, Jenkintown, Pennsylvania. But I just was born there because my grandparents were there. And my father was a merchant seaman. So my grandmother didn't want my mother to have the baby while he was away, which she did. And so she went home and stayed with my grandparents until I was born. And then as soon as I was born, we went back to, she took me back to Staten Island where I grew up. And then I went to high school in Goshen, New York, which is up in Orange County. And then I went to NYU. And then I got married, not to this one, and moved to, Anyway, I ended up here and I went to GW, and that's when we started.
So how did you
Anyway, I got divorced, by the way.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, I want to, let's clean that all it up.
How did the two of you meet?
I was the student director of a law school clinic, and Yvonne was the administrative assistant of the professor who was overseeing the clinic. And we always joked that
I signed his checks.
I had to watch what I was doing because she signed my check. And it went from there.
Yeah.
And how long was the courtship?
3 years.
3 years. So tell us a little bit about the reactions of each of your families when you were introduced to them Was there immediate acceptance? Did you have to overcome anything?
Quite the opposite. I'll give the Reader's Digest version since we only have an hour. No, my parents were totally against it. They came down. I told them over the phone, and they came down to meet Yvonne. And we met at the apartment where she was living in McLean Gardens in DC. I don't know. I've repressed most of it. It probably was an hour and a half or 2 hours. It was very icy.
I wish we could tell the whole story.
Took them back to the train. Told them I'm continuing the relationship, and I got intense pressure from my uncle, their rabbi, all sorts of people. What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah.
You're killing him.
Yes, you're killing him. Yes, somebody said you're killing my father. And that lasted until about 3 weeks before we were going ahead with what? Yeah, go ahead.
I asked my mother, what should I do? Because Ken didn't want me to invite them to the wedding. And she said, no, you have to do the right thing. It is up to them to decline. So I sent them an invitation to the wedding. And then
about 3 weeks before the wedding, and we had made plans of friends of ours were going to walk me down the aisle and what have you. I got a call from my father. Said they wanted to talk. So we met at what was then the Howard Johnsons at the Delaware Memorial Bridge, halfway between. And my father said he had a dream. And he said in his dream, his father came to him and he said, I missed your wedding. Don't do the same thing with your son. And they came to the wedding and invited friends to come to the wedding. My friends were astonished at how they got into it. And from that point on, and for the rest of their lives, they treated Yvonne, they liked Yvonne better than they liked me.
Yeah.
How about from
His
your
father
side,
and I
Yvonne?
used to talk every Sunday, and I'd give him a new Yiddish word, and he was so happy with me.
So sweet.
Yeah.
How was the reaction on your side, Yvonne?
My father had already died at this point. It wouldn't have killed him because he was already used to, whatever craziness I was going to do. But my mother was fine. I guess it was my grandmother we were a little concerned about.
I forgot about that story.
Yeah, but he had met everyone. Everybody was happy, and so we had to bring him to Nana.
That was the acid test.
That was it, because that was it. And we went, and she was a phenomenal caterer, and she made one of her fantastic meals and all of her fine china and everything. And Ken had 2 servings of everything. And then she said, without prompting. And then my grandmother asked him, would you like some more, dear? And he said, yes, please. And he handed his plate. And afterwards she said, I like it. He has a good appetite and very good hair. And so we got married.
And Tanya was okay with it, wasn't
Oh, yeah. And
my aunt, actually the one who was here before my father, she was okay with it, but she was the only member of the family that was okay with it. Everybody else, no. So there was at least one person. Before the
Howard Johnsons.
Yes.
Do you think that the concern was overwhelmingly about racial differences? Was it about religious backgrounds? Was it about?
No, it was race.
It was race.
It was race.
100%.
Yep.
Did they come out and say that?
Well, I said to his mother, if I was a blonde prostitute, it'd be all right, huh?
Wow. How'd that go over?
Oh, she said, I have such a headache.
When you were each growing up, do you recall hearing about cultural or racial diversity? Was that a topic of conversation in either of your home?
Not diversity per se. I mean, one of the big things growing up was the New York City school strike of 1968 in Brooklyn, and that was obviously based on racial control of the schools in Brooklyn. My father and I had some interesting conversations about that. Yeah. So, and I was probably naive. I actually thought it would be more important that Yvonne was going to be Jewish, and that would be the overriding factor, but it wasn't.
Mm. And from your side, Yvonne?
No, it was not a subject of conversation. I mean, I grew up in the 60s, but I grew up in an integrated neighborhood and I went to integrated schools. And so it never was, it wasn't no. Mm-mm.
And I grew up in a neighborhood that wasn't integrated until I went to junior high school. My public school was almost all white. And my neighborhood was white. Queens, I remember very distinctly, there was an article in the New York Times one Sunday about the Mason-Dixon line of Queens, which was Junction Boulevard, which was the major north-south street. And to the west of it was white, and the schools were white. To the east of it was African-American. The public schools came together in the junior high school, and that's basically where, I wouldn't say I had my first exposure, but that's where it became a more integrated class.
So once you got married and started your life together, did you encounter challenges? Did people judge? Did people create barriers? Was there?
I think
what were some of the challenges, if there were any?
I think I could honestly say that in all these years, and this was early in our marriage, the only time I ever heard anything, and it wasn't even clear. We were walking down the street in Manhattan, and somebody said something, and I have no idea what it was.
And I don't know that I heard,
but you could tell from the tone
that it wasn't right, but we didn't know what it was.
And we kept on walking, and whoever it was didn't hassle us further. And that's, as far as I know, that's literally the only time anybody's ever said anything in that regard.
Now, we're not naive enough to know that people have said stuff not in our earshot, but not to us directly. Mm-mm.
And how about as you were raising your kids?
No, and it was really funny. We were all ready to have the talk, and just as soon as they come, and they have a problem, and we were all ready, and they didn't ever come to us with anything. After they were adults, Jessica told us, that's our oldest, she told us that when she was at Shepherd Park Elementary, that's right before we lived here, before we moved up here.
It's in the district.
It's in the district. That they used to call her Zebra Girl. And I said, well, why didn't you tell Mom? And she said, it was no big deal. So, and then we've had some interesting. Oh yeah, Johanna, when she was at the day school, when she graduated, she wrote something in the Lion's, used to be called the Lion's Tail. I think, would you tell me to change? Anyway, and she said that she had always thought that it was going to come, that people were going to judge her differently, but it never came. So she was all ready, and it never happened. No, we had funny things. Now, as far as we know, I know Jessica about the zebra and about the guy, she went to Bullis. Jessica went to Bullis one year, and
I forgot about that.
Right, yeah. And one of her classmates, it was the first year that it was co-ed, and one of her classmates, a boy, asked her to go to Congressional to play tennis. And she said, oh, my parents told me that they don't allow Jews or Blacks there. And he said, that's okay, you don't look Jewish.
Oy vey.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's all. Yeah, that's all the horror stories we have. I mean,
as far as the kids
go.
Yeah.
How about it when you were looking for a synagogue to join?
Well, we moved to Shepherd Park, which is on upper Northwest and 16th Street, and we bought a house that was two three blocks from Tifereth, Israel. So that's where we went and spoke to Rabbi Abramowitz, and that's where we got married. I mean, we liked it. We used to go to Friday night services pretty regularly.
Yeah.
They had a Friday night service. So we were there, let's see, 18 months. We only lived there for 18 months. Then we moved here. We were moving basically for the schools because Jessica was going to enter sixth or seventh grade. So we spoke to Rabbi Abramowitz, and he said, "I tell you what, I know this congregation up in Potomac. Just tell Lenny that that Buddy sent the call, and
Buddy
sent you." So we came to Har Shalom and joined, and
that was it. We walked in and Rabbi Abramowitz said we should join here. We'll be happy. Yeah. So we filled out the papers, and that was it.
And you felt immediately welcomed, embraced.
Absolutely. Rabbi Kahan was, as it. Oh.
Yep. I know Elizabeth is on somewhere.
Yep. Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
Where are you?
There she is.
Hi.
He's there.
They were our, yep.
And we got involved pretty quick. I mean, congregants.
4 years. Remember, I wouldn't join Sisterhood.
Not Sisterhood. We did the tablet.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Within a year and a half or so, we made some friends, and
we started doing the tablet.
And Then I became program chair, and it went from there.
And Sisterhood kept bugging me to join, and I kept saying, I have a full-time job. This is when a lot of members of Sisterhood didn't work. And I said, I have a full-time job, like.
And your meetings are at
and they had meetings at lunchtime and what have you. And Selma Miller came up to me one evening. I was at Har Shalom for something or other. And she said, I really need you. Oh, she said something about the sister. Are you coming to Sisterhood meeting? And I said, no, I'm not a member. And she said, you're not a member? You're a member the first year for free that you're a member. And I said, well, I have a full-time job. Your meetings are daytime. She said, please come. I'll put you on the board. So she put me on the board of Sisterhood.
Well, she used you to change it.
And she said, I need you because there are things that I want to change. And so
like the time of meeting.
The time of meeting. And we used to have our volunteer appreciation luncheon used to be midweek at lunchtime. And I would go to my grave happy that is one thing that I did help Selma get changed was it's always been on a Sunday or whatever, or at night ever since then. So that working women could go.
God bless Selma. God bless Selma. There are an increasing number of interracial families at Har Shalom. Some in the early childhood center, some in the religious school. Is there anything that you would want them to know, any wisdom that you would want to impart to them as they raise their kids in the Jewish community today and in this synagogue, in this time period? What advice, what kind of experience would you like to impart upon them as they hopefully raise wonderful children and such a strong, close-knit family as you did?
Well, I would say, at least from our experience, we were immediately welcomed at Har Shalom. Right. In terms of, the congregants getting to know us and accepting us fully. But, I mean, there were a couple of instances, one of which stands out to this day. On the day Johanna was named, obviously both of us went up to the Bima. And there was a person there, I don't know if they were a member, and they commented to the person next to them, who is a member, and said, oh, isn't it nice? He brought the nanny up with her.
Oh my.
And that person turned to her and said, she's the mother. and when we, after the baby naming and came down, I think it was in that.
Sure.
And it was Sandy Myers came down and gave Yvonne a big hug. So again, for people who don't know, it's the background. You know, in different circumstances, I could have been thinking like that. So I think it's important for Har Shalom, the leadership, lay leadership, clergy, members, whatever, to realize that it's not just the Ashkenazi experience. And that has to be made clear in talking about, I don't know, what you did, how you grew up in Rosh Hashanah, what your Passover experience was, or whatever. It's not all the eating brisket and coming from Europe. So I would say that more to understand where these other people are coming from. There was another instance.
Yeah, I was coming out of the social hall, a number of you may know this, and a woman who I didn't know, who obviously wasn't a member of Har Shalom, was walking the opposite direction, and she stopped and she walked and stopped in front of me, and in a very aggressive tone, she said, "We're out of plates. Where are the plates?" And obviously she thought I was the kitchen staff, and she was having the luncheon for her granddaughter's baby naming. And I actually wrote a play about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which some of you might have seen.
Which some of you, well, no.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, and well, that was the monologue. Anyway, it's basically because, you know, and in that play, there's a thing where I said she doesn't remember when her race was Jew, because Jews weren't white until they got to America. Jews were Jews. They weren't German Jews. They were Jews who lived in Germany, or Jews who lived in Poland, or Jews who lived in Lithuania. That was the race. Came here and we had a box you had to check that said race. And the closest thing they could think of was, so they checked white. And Jews became white and have assimilated all, for the most part, all of those white conceptions, and not realizing that that's not who we are.
So I guess we got off the question. Again, I would say in terms of Har Shalom,
Still, yeah.
I think totally welcoming, totally accepting, but I think there has to be learning on both sides, not on both. That's not the right way.
Not going to be a good night.
As Yvonne did, of course, a number of years ago when she was program chair.
Oh, yeah. Adult
ed chair, and it was, I think it was entitled "Funny You Don't Look Jewish," and she got different members of Har Shalom
from all
over, from Korea, Cuba, Spain,
Puerto Rico,
Brazil, wherever, and
Ghana.
They all came, spoke about their experiences growing up, and
their food.
And then it was obviously, it was being at Har Shalom, she tied it to food, and they each cooked a representative dish from their country. And I think a lot of people learned that, again, there are Jews everywhere.
And Jews that are indigenous, that look like the indigenous population, not just Jews who happen to have
sojourned in a certain place for a certain time.
Right.
Notwithstanding what you said about Jews being white, for lack of a better terminology, in the recent population surveys of the American Jewish community, 1 in 7 American Jews identify themselves as Jews of color, right? Which is roughly 1 million people. It's an incredible number, and I think that most mainstream American Jews don't realize what a significant part of our population is not quote unquote white. That being said, I'm wondering about your thoughts on how both the Jewish community at large and also Har Shalom, if applicable, could be more intentionally and proudly multiracial. Like you alluded, Ken, to not always kind of defaulting to the Ashkenazi experience, right? So
Right.
that's certainly, I think, common, because a lot of American synagogues tend to be made up of Jews of Ashkenazi descent. What other ways could the Jewish community be more intentionally and proudly and safely a truly multiracial community?
Well, for example, there's a Jewish community, a Black Jewish community in the Washington area that was written about in the Post. I'm going to say about a year ago now. And it would seem that maybe we could do something, like have brunch together or go out to, well, we could have a Zoom brunch together. Yeah, the whole new world here. Excuse me, but Johanna, is that Johanna or Jessica? Oh, one of our daughters wanted to join, but you've surpassed your 100 person limit.
Oh no.
Anyway, doing stuff like that. Then there's Bikol Lashon, which is, and I don't think, unless somebody asked about it, like, who was it who asked me?
Jonathan Smith?
Yeah, about, was there something? So I told him, but it should be something I would think that all of us, I've learned so much on there. There are, the maps, the history, the books, the movies, the Speakers Bureau. They have camps. I mean, they're, it's non-denominational, what have you. And a lot of the contributors are Jews of color, or, Jews of color. I'm trying to think whether they're also dealing with the transgender community, but whatever. So there are things like that I think would be very helpful, because unless you see, and you keep being able to check that white box, because my joke is, and it's not a joke, I always carry my passport with me, because whether they come for the Jews or the Blacks first, I'm out. I'm the first one you're picking up, along with my kids and my grandkids or what have you. So it's, I think, something we need to really pay attention to is we've become so ingrained in the American culture that we forget, I think, sometimes who we are. So I would like to see more of that, because I'm othered, even in Har Shalom. I mean, it's not intentional. My best friends are Har Shalom members, but they really are. I mean, it's my family, but it's still othered, because along with everyone else who's not of, Ashkenazi, we're not, there's never any mention of, except as we being the other, that we are part of something bigger than our Eastern European roots.
I want to give participants who are here the opportunity to ask you questions, if that's okay. But I just wanted to ask you one final question before we open it up to everyone else. How have the events of the past several weeks, and obviously it has a much longer history than the past several weeks, but that have been kind of brought to the attention and awareness of so many people in the past several weeks. How has that resonated with you? How is it sitting with you? What concerns is it raising for you? How are you feeling about all of the, you know,
Well,
all of the things that are happening in the community today, in the world today, in our country today.
it's made me much more attuned to the institutional / economic racism history of this country. It isn't just bad police, or it isn't just housing. Like, I didn't know till a short time ago, before the last couple of months, but you know, the GI Bill was very discriminatory. And you read all these studies, ownership of houses creates wealth, and wealth creates wealth to the next generation. So it goes on and on and on. So it requires a whole new way of thinking. It's not just a few racist policies that have to be fixed. And I've learned a lot, or it's sharpened my thinking about that in the last few weeks. And hopefully it has with a lot of other people. You know, the history of police, which goes back to the slave patrols. So it's, again, like I said, it's not just a few bad cops. There's a lot institutionally that has to be fixed in this country to become an anti-racist country. And you could get into the acting. But...
All right. No, well,
or whatever.
Well, look, I don't even know where to start. Yes, a lot of things have come to my attention. And one thing that Ken and I were talking about, and we'd like to give you, Rabbi Raskin, credit, is when Eric Garner, when he was murdered, 2016, that Shabbat, you gave a sermon and you said, I'm going to start off saying, I am not going to have a knee-jerk reaction to this. I've just spent time with the Montgomery County leadership, whatever, and we went out with the police, and they never know what they're going to they never know what to expect. And Ken and I, quite frankly, go ahead, we were just blown away that you could say that without going online and clicking how many people of color have been murdered by police. And since then, to see that you are starting the conversation, that you had, you know, the Pastor Michael, that you really, you know, engaged, that I know Ken Lecter sent you an email about something. And it seems, you know, that we can, you know, we can move, but we've got to have leadership. At that point, if you brought up something, not you, if one brought up something like that, it was going to be a topic of personal conversation, but nobody was going to do anything. But now I see people are trying to do. People are trying to learn. People are, you know, it's going to take us. They're trying to learn. I mean, you know, it's not going to come overnight. But when you consider that most people don't realize that, as Ken was saying, with housing, the reason there are ghettos were because when they tried to pass the GI Bill, the Republican Congress would not pass it unless it was segregated, unless the housing for the GIs was segregated housing. And that's how that all started. But nobody talks about that.
Or didn't.
Oh, well, they did. Well, now they're starting to talk about it. I don't even know. I guess it was a straw that broke the camel's back. And recently, I guess because being in such an eclectic environment between being Black, Jewish, female, progressive, whatever, I've got a lot of different avenues that I'm hearing so many different voices from so many different places of people who are really trying, all kinds of people, you know, trying to figure out what the heck. I had no idea. But now that, you know, I have some idea, I'm at least trying to do something, you know, just go online, read a book, you know. What is the book you're reading?
Well, I just finished How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Yeah, and I sent you a list of things I know, and those are things that maybe you could share with the congregation. Ken Lecter wants to do something, and it turns out just before this conference call, this Zoom call, whatever, I got a call from a director who wanted me to read some of those monologues from that, and for next Sunday. And I'm thinking, okay, so now people are, this is going around, all from the same show, monologue, whatever. I don't know what you want to call it. So I think I think information has to be shared. And I think people have to be willing to realize that because you have been, now I'm talking about Ashkenazi Jews, have been able to check the white box. That's where the divide has come.
Thank you. Friends, why don't you, if people want to jump in, just unmute yourself and go right ahead. Obviously with respect and deference to Ken and Yvonne. Anyone want to jump in?
I do. Me.
Just identify yourself.
Sheila Moldover. Hi.
Hi, Sheila.
Well, we've known Ken and Yvonne since we joined the congregation in 1983. So I had two things I wanted to know if you could address. One is, how different might it have been if you had boys instead of girls in terms of growing up as an interracial family? And the other is, in terms of Har Shalom, it's being very local now, how much of, or would it be helpful if there was more of a recognition of families where we're talking about, somebody who has converted so that their background is not Jewish, forgetting about Ashkenazi Jewish, but to begin to deal with that as well as may or may not be a racial component?
Very quickly, that was one of the things I had in the notes to address. I think that's one of the things, that's the question that annoys me the most, is people asking me why, how, when, did you convert? Once you're either a Jew or you're not a Jew. Conversion has nothing to do with it. I don't want to hear about it. Don't ask me. Okay, moving on. If it had been boys, I think it would have been different because one, we would have had to tell a boy.
We would have had to have the talk.
We would have had to have the talk for his own safety.
Right. I mean, in terms of Har Shalom, I don't think there would have been a difference. In terms of society.
Dating.
Well, could have been.
Dating might have been an issue.
But again, could have been. But certainly, look, for most of you out there who had sons, you're okay, they're okay. I mean, our grandson has been stopped by the police, pulled over and said his taillight wasn't working. And while they're looking at his license, the policeman said, okay, where are the drugs and guns? And if anybody knows Malcolm.
And everybody, anybody. So a lot of you have known Malcolm since he was born. So,
so we would have certainly had to have the talk and how to act. So that would have been different. But I think that's true of any young black male. So
yeah, which is unfortunate, but it's the truth.
I just want to reiterate something that you said, Yvonne, that it's actually the halacha, that it's Jewish law that we don't inquire about a Jew by choice and their past or cast any aspersions on or make any distinctions between Jews, regardless of whether they're Jews by birth or Jews by choice. So that's absolutely sacrosanct. And we shouldn't make those kinds of distinctions, unless, of course, a Jew by choice chooses to share that part of their story. But we certainly, nobody should you know, kind of, you know, point to those distinctions. Because as you said, we are all members of the Jewish people. Other questions, other comments?
I have a question.
Just say who you are in case we can't see everybody at the same time.
Yeah, this is Leon Weintraub.
Hi, Leon.
I'm old enough that I can look back with a certain amount of nostalgia to the 1960s and what seemed at the time to me is a very strong alliance between both the African American and the Jewish drive for equality and equal treatment in the United States. I was aware of early Jewish leadership and senior positions in the NAACP, and we've all seen that iconic picture of Martin Luther King walking with Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, with among other people. I wonder if, from your unique perspective, yeah, there it is. Yeah,
There it is.
I wonder if Yvonne and Ken, from your unique perspective, you have any insights you care to offer about how that relationship stands now and how it evolved from where it was, how different do you think it is, and any predictions about the future?
Well, I think in New York, I'll go back to the school strike of '68. I think that destroyed the Black Jewish coalition in New York for a long, long time. And I'm not sure of other reasons. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. I don't know if affirmative action hit people the wrong way. Forget it, you know, just Jews who were locked out of universities and what have you in the 50s and 40s. Some of us forgot about that. It does seem, based on what's happened the last 2 months, that it's now starting to come back and be a joint effort. I hope that continues. I think everybody hoping continues.
I agree with Ken. I'm not familiar with the school strike. I didn't.
You were out already.
Yeah. Well, I was in college already. And I had, as I said, I had never gone to public school, so it was never an issue. But I think, again, and I know this sounds like I'm on a one track, but because given all of those things and the affirmative action and quota versus quotas and this and that, again, the Jewish population has become so ingrained in the general American fabric of America as white that it's hard. You know, they're not making the things that bound people recently out of the Holocaust or out of that environment, whether it was in Europe or here, and the things that what's a generation, they've forgotten. They don't realize that you, and now I'm talking about that you were us.
Like I said, we had the quotas.
Yeah.
We couldn't get into law firms. We couldn't get into schools. The difference being, of course, when I walk in a room, no one knows I'm Jewish.
Right.
When Yvonne walks in a room, I mean, you know, there's an immediate. Curtain's not the right word.
Yes,
but
I was just on another Zoom meeting of theater people, mostly from Washington, Chicago, whatever, and they were talking about and one of the things one of them brought up was the term colorblind casting, and one of the people on the panel happens to be on the equity board of for equal whatever, equal representation in equity theaters for performers and what have you. And she said, there is no such thing as colorblind casting. When I walk, and she was a Black woman, when I walk into a room, you can see that I am Black. It is, you know, it's not something that you cannot not see. It's like if I didn't have a leg, it's not, you know, like physical disability. It's something that's there. It's not good, it's not bad, but it is, and you have to recognize it. And yeah.
There was a question in the chat. Are you as optimistic today as you may have been 20 or 30 or 50 years ago?
I was optimistic, more optimistic 40 years ago, less optimistic 6 months ago. I am now more optimistic again.
I would say the same thing. Certainly what's happened over the last 4 or 5 months has made me more optimistic, hopeful, whatever term, that serious change is coming to this country that's been needed for a long time. I would say 40 years ago, 50 years ago, I might have been hopeful, but in a more naive way.
Yeah. I think because neither one of us really, you know, it didn't smack us in the face, it didn't kick us, and you know, the first time apparently.
But also, as I said before, I didn't know about the underlying reasons of history 50 years
Ken,
ago.
it's hard to hear you.
As I said before, I didn't know 50 years ago, I didn't know about the underlying history of the United States in this regard. It was just, yeah, everybody's getting along, great, we'll move along and things will be hunky-dory. That obviously wasn't the case, but I'm more optimistic now than I was half a year ago.
Yeah.
And, this is Deborah Cohen. I just wanted to bring up another facet of this, and that is that there is a strong element among African Americans of anti-Semitism. How do you recommend that we as Jews address that? I was down with the Zionist group at Lafayette Square when I was 13, demonstrating for equal rights. Mm-hmm. And that organization stopped bringing us down there as part of their activities because of SNCC and Stokely Carmichael coming out with some very anti-Semitic comments. I know in my experiences, I've seen the spectrum. So is there something that we as a Caucasian Jewish community can do with the African American non-Jewish community to try to ameliorate some of those old problems?
Well, some of them are old and some of them are ongoing.
Right. No
yeah.
argument there.
I'm sorry, did you hear me?
No argument there.
Yeah, some of them are ongoing.
Well, I would just, communication. The fact that we had Pastor Michael 2 weeks ago was great. We got his, you know, unfortunately it was only an hour, so you couldn't go too far, but we got his perspective on things. I'm sure the rabbi and he have had more conversations than took place at that time. So you just have to keep on talking and learning about where the other person's coming from, and not just dismiss everything out of hand and find common ground. Look, there were certainly, and putting aside Israel, because I think the issue went deeper than that. There were things both sides said that shouldn't have been said, and it just takes a lot of work to find common ground.
Yeah, and Ken brought it up. I hadn't even thought about that, but I think that is a sore point because even for Jews of color, how Jews, the Ethiopian Jews are treated in Israel is just a disgrace to me. And, you know, and I think I worked on Operation Moses. And I remember when trying to get the Russian Jews out before, and they had an option because they had to change planes in Munich, I think. Anyway, and at that point, they had to decide whether they were coming to the US or Israel. And the vast majority of them came here because they had no connection to being Jewish, except that their parents or grandparents had been Jews. And then they went to Israel and they get treated like
Immediately
as Jewish, accepted, whatever. But you take the Ethiopians who have been practicing pre-rabbinical Judaism faithfully for centuries, and they have to jump through hoops and what have you. That ticks me off. So I know, and so when, so when non-Jewish Blacks look at the Israeli situation and things that are going on there now, they see the same thing and they say it's racist. So it's kind of hard to argue with that. So I don't know how we get around that. Except to keep talking. Just keep talking.
I spoke about that issue a couple of weeks ago when the episode of Moses marrying a Cushite woman.
Yeah.
And what did that really mean? And I talked about the Ethiopian experience. And you're right, our community, both here in Israel and in other places, still has a lot of work to do. And I want to thank you both so much for your honesty and your openness, for the opportunity to listen to you and to hear your stories and to get to know you better. As people and as a couple and as a family. I think we've all been very enriched by this hour together. And hopefully this time has helped us draw closer together as a community and as a congregational family. And Ken and Yvonne, again, I want to thank you so much for everything that you shared and your willingness to be so open with us tonight.
Well, and we'd like to thank you for putting this program together.
Yeah.
It's important. Again, communication.
Really important, and we really appreciate it. And we really appreciate everybody coming.
This is it.
Thank you.
Even if you did block out our daughter.
Well, please tell her, just 2 more items to share. Number 1, this conversation was recorded so we can share it with Johanna and with the rest of the family if they want to watch the recording. I also want you to know, obviously Yvonne knows this, but for the others of you to know that there is a Social Action Tikkun Olam group that is working on several initiatives, one of them being the issue of racial justice and exploring opportunities to continue learning and even more so getting involved in various ways to bridge these gaps, to increase understanding, to get involved in various ways throughout the community. So please be on the lookout for more opportunities like these and others so that we can continue to do this holy work together. So thank you again so very much. We appreciate 97 people logged on right now, Ken and Yvonne. That's an incredible.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And see you tomorrow night.
Yvonne and Rabbi, can you not hang up for a second, please?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Thanks for joining us.
Johanna and let her, or I'll
It
text her.
was Jessica.
I'll let them know that it's recorded.
Oh, it's Jessica.
Yeah, Jessica was the one who tried to get on.
That's right, because California. All right. Well.
All right.
Okay, Rabbi, thank you for keeping this open. And thank you, Yvonne and Ken, for staying here. I want to introduce you to somebody, if I could.
Okay.
We'll just wait for everyone else to go.
Where's
Night,
Beth
night.
Ann?
What?
Oh, you want everybody else gone?
Oh.
Yeah. I was just going to be patient and be very quiet and polite.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because that's me. Is Laura there still? Laura?
He's in the waiting room. Should I?
That is rude.
Yeah, please bring Laura back in, if you would.
Okay.
I've piqued everyone's interest.
Holy Myers.
Wow, look at all the people. We're looking at all the names as they're going on. Oh, Barbara Hirsch.
I think
I
she's
see her.
coming back.
She's back.
Okay, she's back. Good.
Oh, Laura.
Laura, unmute yourself.
I wanted to, yeah, Laura, unmute yourself.
Okay,
So this is my best friend from high school, Laura, and this is my rabbi, the one who
Hi,
says
Laura.
Rabbi Adam Raskin, and this is Yvonne and Ken. And so Laura's yearbook picture, like her yearbook post said, you know, people say, I want to go to change the world. I want to be a beautician. Hers was, I want to be Jewish. Because
Wow.
all of her friends, except for her, were Jewish. Fast forward, she goes to Columbia, she graduates, she moves to Chicago, she meets her now husband, who is Black, and they are in the process, by his doing, of converting to Judaism.
Wow. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Welcome. Well, we had a somewhat similar experience. And we for our Zoom Seder, a friend of ours, and had invited her friend, who I think has been at
Her girl.
Seder for how long?
They
And you
grew
got
up
to move
together.
back. Ken, you're too close
Yeah.
to the mic, I think. You need to like sit back where Yvonne
I'm
is.
too close. Okay.
Since they were children. I mean,
I don't know if you heard what I said at our Zoom Seder.
kindergarten.
A friend of
Oh,
ours,
wow.
and has this. Her friend has been at their Seder, not Jewish, but has been at her Seders since they were in kindergarten. And Dara's what? I don't know, 25 plus.
No,
That was
30.
like me.
Yeah.
That was like Laura
That
at
was
my
like me
house.
with Beth Ann.
And she didn't realize that she didn't, anyway.
Well, she knew she wasn't, but she knows, she knew the Seder and
Yeah.
participated and all that. Yep.
So
Wow.
I wanted her to hear this, and I'd love her to be just connected to you guys. Her husband couldn't be here. But if we were like in person and live, I would have brought her up to meet the speakers. So that's what I'm doing.
Absolutely. So hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Exactly.
Nice to meet you.
I'm glad your dreams are coming true.
Yes.
We need all we can. Where do you live?
In Denver, Colorado.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
but see, Zoom has
That's
made
right.
all of this possible.
Yes, exactly. So in some ways, it's like, thank goodness for the pandemic.
Yeah, I know. And I said that and I thought, what are you saying? But, there's a good side. Every cloud has a silver lining kind of thing.
Right.
I've
Yes.
met more people that I never would have
No, you're
met
taking your acting course.
taking classes, meeting people from Japan and, Colorado.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's incredible. Yep.
Yep. And tell your husband that, are you having, you already, have you converted yet?
No. So we're starting all the classes and stuff, and we have to find a temple and a rabbi to sponsor us and everything. And that all kind of got put on hold with the pandemic. But it is very seriously in our plans.
Well,
we're very excited about it.
Well,
get
good.
ready to read.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was always one of my always pet peeves. I said, you get to be born Jewish and don't have to learn anything. I have to read the Geniza.
I know.
Well, at least we'll get to read it together.
Whenever a question comes up, for the most part, I say, all right, I'll ask the rabbi, meaning Yvonne.
Yeah.
Well, if we can be of help to you, Laura, please let us know. I know a lot of wonderful rabbis in Denver. My brother-in-law lives in Denver.
Wonderful.
So Beth Ann can connect us if I can help.
Rabbi Raskin will
awesome.
friend you on
Yeah.
Facebook like by the end of the evening.
Yeah, you've probably done it
Well,
already.
But her last name isn't there, so that's harder,
Laura Cross.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
Okay,
great to meet
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
You guys too.
Thank
Have a
you,
good night.
Yvonne.
Have a good
See you
night.
tomorrow.